Chapter 211. Seraphina stepped forward, cautious but curious, the crimson glow of Erebus bone armor fading as she dismissed it. Her eyes locked onto the blooming lotus, its petals shimmering with an otherworldly light, as if the ice itself had captured the essence of dawn. "What is that?" she asked, her voice softer than usual. "Ice crystal lotus," I replied, stepping beside her. "It's what you need to step beyond." Her head tilted slightly. "Step beyond." I nodded. Most elixirs and pills were useful, at least in a marginal sense. They boosted mana flow, aided recovery, refined the body, but nothing transformative. This was different. The ice crystal lotus wasn't just an elixir in solid form. It was something beyond that, a relic of the supernatural, a fragment of nature's own untapped potential. Like a gift, it defied conventional understanding. And for Seraphina it was perfect. Her body aspect gift, ice crystal jade body, was powerful, but incomplete. She had yet to truly grasp the dual nature of it, the balance between freezing and blossoming. This lotus would change that. It was the heart of the Northern Sea Ice Palace, a treasure that once symbolized its legacy, offering enlightenment to those worthy enough to receive it. Now it belonged to her. I bent down, carefully plucking it from the frost. The petals pulsed faintly in my grip, almost as if it were alive. The dungeon groaned around us, cracks spiderwebbing along the frozen walls. It was collapsing. "Time to go," I muttered. We stepped through the crumbling gateway, emerging onto the icy plains outside just as the dungeon's entrance sealed itself shut, the structure dissolving into nothing. Seraphina barely spared it a glance. Her focus was on the lotus. "Consume it, Sarah," I urged. She hesitated only for a moment, then reached out, her fingers brushing the petals. The moment she made contact, the lotus dissolved, its essence sinking into her mana circuits like ink spilling into water. She closed her eyes and sank to the ground, crossing her legs, the snow beneath her untouched by the cold. Her breathing slowed. A quiet stillness settled over her, like the calm before an impending storm. I exhaled, stepping back, giving her space. But I didn't take my eyes off her. Not for a second. Seraphina's mana wouldn't increase immediately, but she was already on the cusp of white rank. Before the Interacademy Festival, I estimated. By then, she would comfortably step into white rank, her foundation stronger than ever. I, on the other hand, would be at integration rank if everything went according to plan. Starting the integration process will take time, though, I sighed internally. I hated this plateau even though it was expected. White rank was strange that way. It wasn't just about accumulating mana anymore. It was about refinement, control, pushing the very limits of what was possible before integration. And I was pushing. I was getting stronger. My mana control had sharpened. My arts were more refined. The Arthur of now was leagues above the Arthur who fought Lucifer at the tournament. But not by much. Not enough. And the problem? I knew exactly how strong Lucifer was about to become. Integration rank Lucifer was an entirely different beast. The current Lucifer was impressive because he reached white rank so ridiculously early, but integration rank Lucifer? He was a monster. And now? He was even stronger than he had been in the novel. His second gift had awakened earlier than it should have, which meant he would grow even faster than before. I exhaled slowly. Calm down. I couldn't let it consume me. I couldn't let myself spiral. Seraphina stirred, pulling me from my thoughts. The glow around her had faded, the ice crystal lotus's energy fully absorbed. She blinked slowly as she rose to her feet, flexing her fingers as if testing something unseen. "How do you feel?" I asked. She took a breath, tilting her head slightly as she listened to something deep within herself. "Better," she murmured. "I'm not fully sure yet, though." I nodded. She wouldn't feel the full effects yet. Not until she reached integration rank. That's when the real transformation would begin. "Let's return," I suggested. Seraphina hesitated. Then, she shook her head. "Let's stay one more night," she said, her voice softer than usual. "I want to spend time with you here." I raised an eyebrow, half smirking. "Do you have a thing for ruined places?" "Somewhat," she admitted, completely serious, before she reached for my hand. I blinked. "And I like being with you," she added, just as straightforward, fingers intertwining with mine. "So I don't mind where we are." I stared. Seraphina wasn't normally like this. Her actions had always spoken louder than her words, but now, For the first time, her words matched her actions. And they were bold. I chuckled, squeezing her hand lightly. "Lead the way, Sarah." And just like that, we wandered together, two figures against the endless stretch of snow and forgotten ruins. The wind howled softly through the shattered spires of the once great palace, sweeping across the landscape in thin, curling wisps. We walked along broken bridges that led to nowhere, our footsteps crunching against the frost-covered stone. The night sky stretched above us, untouched and endless, stars flickering like distant embers. She led me through the half-buried remnants of a market square, where ice had consumed the stalls, freezing the past in place. We passed the remains of towering statues, their faces eroded by time, their once proud forms now shadows of memory. The silence wasn't haunting. Not anymore. It was peaceful. Serafina's grip on my hand remained steady, her expression unreadable but content. For the first time in a long while, there was no battle waiting for us. No trial to overcome. Just us. In the ruins of a world that once was. "This was nice," I said, exhaling as we both sat in the snow. The cold was sharp, but not biting, settling around us like an old companion. The tents were already set up, their high-tech insulation humming faintly, keeping the chill at bay. Night had long since fallen, and soon it would be time to sleep. One last night here before we left. "Yeah," Serafina murmured, her voice softer than usual. She still hadn't let go of my hand. A comfortable silence settled between us, stretching with the quiet patience of falling snow. Then, she asked, "What will you do next?" I leaned back, resting on my elbows, looking up at the stars scattered across the vast, untouched sky. "I need to go to the Tower of Magic first," I said. "Then attend Rachel's and your birthdays. Spend some time with family." I paused for a second, then added, "And establish my own guild." Serafina turned her head slightly, her silver hair catching the moonlight. "Your own guild?" "Yeah." I nodded, feeling the weight of it settle in my chest. "I need power, and to do that I need to build something of my own. A guild strong, influential, right in the heart of the Slatemark Empire." She didn't look surprised. If anything, there was something close to pride in her expression, her fingers tightening slightly around mine. "I'm sure you'll do well," she said simply. I hesitated. Then, before I could overthink it, I spoke. "Sarah, I'm sorry for lying to you." Serafina's grip didn't loosen, but she didn't look at me either. "I know you noticed," I continued. "I know you've already figured out that I wasn't being completely honest. I'm sorry, but there are things I can't tell you yet. Not because I don't trust you, because I need to deal with them myself." Serafina exhaled through her nose, then gave the smallest nod. She wasn't upset. She understood. But that didn't make it right. "I'll come clean about what I can," I added. "When I met Luna, she told me something important, that I exist outside of fate. She couldn't read my destiny. I am fateless." Serafina's eyes flickered. "That's why you lied," she muttered. "Because Achillan didn't choose you to be the emperor of the world this time." I nodded. For the first time, Serafina let go of my hand, but only so she could face me fully. "You know what that means, right?" she asked. I already did. I wasn't bound to fate. I wasn't meant to be some predetermined hero or villain. I was free to choose my own fate, and by doing so, I could change the destiny of this novel that brought ruin to everything. Chapter 212, Guild. I returned to Mount Hua Sect with Serafina, our time in the Northern Sea Ice Palace behind us. She didn't say much when we arrived, but I could tell. Something had shifted. The weight she had carried for so long had lessened, even if only slightly. When it was time to leave, she hugged me tightly, her arms wrapped around me with a warmth that contradicted the winter chill of her manna. "See you soon, Arthur," she murmured. I nodded, my hand briefly squeezing hers before I turned and left. Avalon. The city greeted me with its usual hum of activity, the grand capital of the Slatemark Empire ever moving, ever thriving. But the moment I stepped through the doors of my home, all the noise of the outside world faded into something quieter, warmer. Familiar. "Brother." I barely had time to react before Arya practically materialized in front of me, eyes bright with mischief. "Did you get me a souvenir?" she asked, tone dripping with cheeky expectation. I narrowed my eyes, reaching into my spatial ring before pulling out a small, elegant box. The faint scent of plum blossoms escaped as I flipped it open, revealing neatly arranged sweets, each one carefully crafted and lightly dusted with sugar. For the family, I said pointedly. Arya pouted, arms crossing in mock offense. But I'm your sister, she protested. That means I get first dibs. That means you get equal dibs, I corrected, shutting the box before she could snatch one. Before she could escalate the argument into an elaborate scheme to steal them, my mother pulled me into a soft, warm embrace. We missed you, she murmured, holding me close. For a second I just stood there. Then I smiled. Genuinely. I missed you too, I admitted. Because I had. In my past life I had no family. No one to return to, no home waiting for me. But here I had them. The four of us. My father, my mother, Arya, and I, settled into the living room, the space comfortable, lived in, filled with the quiet warmth that only came from being home. I told them about Mount Hua sect, my training, the techniques I had learned, skimming over the more dangerous details. No need to make them worry. The Northern Sea Ice Palace? That part one left out. Instead, I simply said I had gone to a 6-star dungeon with Serafina under supervision. Technically true, just missing some details. 6-star? My father mused, his brow lifting. That's impressive. And you're not half dead, so I assume it went well. I handled it, I said, smirking slightly. Arya shot me a skeptical look. Handled it? Or did Serafina carry you? I flicked her forehead. Ouch. Rude. I chuckled. For the first time in a while I could just sit back and breathe. And so I put Callie to work. There were people to recruit, paperwork to handle, and endless bureaucratic nonsense that came with establishing a guild in the Slatemark Empire. A guild master had to be at least a 6-star adventurer, and since I wasn't integration rank yet, I didn't qualify. Callie, however, did. Integration rank. 6-star adventurer's license. More than qualified. So, for now, she was the guild master and I was the vice guild master. Of course, I had the paperwork signed and sealed to make sure that once I hit 6-star, we'd swap places. No arguments. Other than that, well, I gave her money, told her to handle things, and relaxed. For a few days, at least. I was having lunch with my family, letting the warm hum of conversation and the clinking of silverware settle into something comfortably mundane. Then the doorbell rang. My mother stood up, brushing her hands off. Who could that be? I glanced toward the door briefly, then went back to eating. Not my problem. Then, hello, Ms. Nightingale. I'm Callie Malekith, Arthur's friend. I froze. That voice. Familiar. But bubbly? I turned my head, slowly, just in time to see my mother clap her hands together, delighted. Oh, Arthur's friend. Please come in. Are you hungry? Oh no, I just grabbed a bite on the way. Callie answered smoothly, her long black hair neatly tied back, her expression the very picture of polite innocence, which, for the record, was bullshit. I narrowed my eyes. Why the hell was she here? Hello, Mr. Nightingale. She greeted my father next. I'm Callie. My father barely blinked before his gaze sharpened. Callie Malekith? Of course, he knew the name. The Malekiths were a powerhouse in the Western continent, their influence roughly equivalent to a marquee house in the Slatemark Empire. It made sense why she could waltz in and handle my guild's paperwork without issue. But that still didn't explain why she was standing in my house in my city with my family. Wow! Are you rank 1 of Class 2A at Mythos Academy? I groaned as Arya shot forward, eyes wide and shining, fangirling at speeds that should be illegal. Nice to meet you, Arya, right? Callie smiled too sweetly. Your brother talks about you. Arya beamed, her hands clasped together like she'd just met her idol. Ah, did he? He didn't say anything bad, right? No. Callie waved a hand dismissively before adding, as you know, he's a good guy. Her tone was too casual, like she was trying to convince herself. I narrowed my eyes further. Callie, I said, standing up. Let's go talk. Sure, she said, a little too quickly. We walked into the living room, stepping into the far corner, away from my family's prying eyes. Then I turned on her. Why are you here? Callie crossed her arms, expression shifting from innocent guest to irritated administrator. I was wondering why the hell you thought it was a good idea to dump all the work on me, she snapped. You made me scout, hire a dozen people, and handle all the paperwork for an entire guild, in the Slatemark Empire, during my summer break, while you were having cozy family time. I shrugged. So? Her eye twitched. So? She hissed, fists clenching at her sides. I could practically see her debating the ethics of punching me in the face, but of course she couldn't. Our mana oath wouldn't let her. And she knew it, which only made her angrier. I leaned against the back of the couch, watching her seethe. "Relax," I said. "You're doing a great job." She exhaled sharply. "Arthur." "Yes." "Shut up. I am aware that you are terrified of failing my impossibly high standards," I said, crossing my arms. "But don't worry. I'm not one to judge too quickly." Callie's shoulders twitched, then trembled. Then, very carefully, she turned to look at me, her glacial stare promising murder. If looks could kill, I would be dead, resurrected, and killed again for good measure. Sadly for her, they couldn't. All right, I said, raising my hands in surrender. "I'll stop pulling your leg." "You better," she said, voice dangerously low. "And you better come with me and make this goddamn guild come to life." I sighed, dramatic and long-suffering. Fine. I'll stop delegating like an evil mastermind and start doing things myself." Callie narrowed her eyes. She was not convinced. "By the way, did you decide on a name?" she asked, rubbing her temples like she already knew the answer. I tilted my head. "Oh, that's my job?" She slapped her forehead. "You are the one who needs to decide," she snapped. "I texted you." "Ah, yeah." I nodded, tapping my chin. "Your texts were mostly complaints, so I, muted you." There was a beat of silence. Then, in an eerily calm whisper, Callie said, "Arthur Nightingale." I coughed. "What?" "I knew you'd call if there was an emergency." "Name. Now." Okay. Let me think." She crossed her arms, glaring at me like she was mentally flipping a coin between homicide and exile. I took a breath, closing my eyes, letting my mind shift gears. A guild name. It needed to be symbolic. Powerful. Something that stood the test of time. Something unbreakable. Something that represented endless power and renewal. Then it came to me. "Ouroboros," I said.
Callie blinked.
"Ha! Ouroboros," I repeated, opening my eyes. "The serpent eating its own tail," she muttered, thoughtful now. "Endless cycles," I nodded. "Rebirth. A symbol of something that cannot die. Something that will always rise again, no matter how many times it falls." Callie tilted her head, considering. Then she smirked. "All right," she said. "I'll admit it. That's a damn good name." "Of course it is," I grinned. "I came up with it." She rolled her eyes. "Now get your self-proclaimed genius ass to work, Guild Master." Chapter 213, Ouroboros. 2 members. That was all it took to establish a guild on temporary status. Of course, permanency came with a catch. To officially register Ouroboros as a bronze rank guild, we had to clear a 6-star dungeon. The paperwork had been laughably easy, thanks to Callie's clout and some well-placed signatures. And just like that, Ouroboros Guild was born. The building Callie bought for our headquarters was massive, a sleek, multi-floored fortress with top-tier technology, lined with reinforced walls, mana shielding, and an AI-driven security system. We stood in front of it, the automated glass doors sliding open as we approached. "You really want to take this to the peak, don't you?" Callie asked, eyeing me as we stepped inside. I nodded. She smirked. "Then this building will do." Inside, the place was silent, deserted. The only movement came from AI maintenance bots gliding through the halls, their glowing eyes sweeping across the floors as they silently handled cleaning and upkeep. I let out a low whistle. "Spacious." "Empty," Callie countered. She clapped her hands together. "All right, we've got 2 major tasks ahead." I raised an eyebrow. "First, recruiting members," she said, counting on her fingers. "Second, completing the 6-star dungeon will be assigned, so we actually exist beyond a technicality." I hummed, tilting my head.
Callie.
She frowned. "What?" I looked at her seriously. "You can solo a 6-star dungeon, right?" For a moment, silence. Then, Callie exhaled sharply, lowering her head. Her shoulders shook.
Callie.
"You crazy." She cut herself off, inhaled deeply, and let it out very, very slowly. I watched her process her emotions. Then, she tilted her head, smiling sweetly, too sweetly. "Arguing with a crazy fucker like you," she said, voice dripping with calm insanity, "is going to make me crazy." I smirked. "So you're saying you can't solo it?" She glared. I shrugged. "Well, doesn't matter. I won't be the one clearing it anyway. Her eye twitched. Oh, it'll be you, I said. And whoever we manage to recruit. Callie stared at me, long and hard. Then, she sighed, rubbing her temples as if trying to physically contain the headache I was giving her. Fine, she muttered deadpan. It really feels like I just signed my soul away to a goddamn devil. I grinned. Well, yes, but in return, you get a massive reward when I reach Radiant rank. She shot me a flat look. I swear to God, Arthur. Anyway, I cut in before she could finish that thought. Who do we need to recruit? Callie waved a hand, pulling up a holographic screen that projected a list of names. You were the one who gave me the list, she pointed out, then tapped on 4 names specifically. But I'm not sure about these guys. I didn't even have to look to know which ones she was doubting. Those 4, I said smoothly, are the most important. Callie frowned. These randos. They may be randos now, I said, tapping the screen where their names were displayed. But they won't be for long. She didn't look convinced. Anyway, I continued, ignoring her skepticism, I'll handle recruiting those 4. You get the other 8. She squinted. That hardly seems fair. Life's not fair, I said with a shrug. Deal with it. She glared at me like she was debating whether or not to punch me. Instead, she exhaled through her nose, rolled her shoulders back, and muttered, Fine, but if I get stuck with the useless ones, I'm making you do all the paperwork for the next year. I waved her off. Yeah, we'll see. I turned back to the holographic screen, scanning the names one last time. My eyes landed on the first recruit. A slow smile crept onto my lips. Time to find the brain of our guild. Our guild needed a brain. Of course, I was there, and there was Callie, though let's be honest, her genius was mostly focused on making my life difficult rather than strategic planning. But I needed someone else. Someone cold, calculated, and precise. I knew exactly where to find them. Avalon, the greatest city in the world. A towering beacon of prosperity, power, and progress. And like any great city, it had an underbelly. A festering labyrinthine shadow that mirrored its grandeur with rot and secrecy. That's where I needed to go. Dressed in a high-collared black coat, I moved through the dimly lit streets of Avalon's underworld, my identity concealed behind a featureless black mask. It wasn't just for theatrics. Being a white rank in a den of criminals was already a declaration of dominance. But recognition, that was a problem I didn't need. The bar was as run down as they came, tucked into a narrow alleyway, its neon sign flickering like it was deciding whether to die or keep suffering. I stepped inside. The moment I crossed the threshold, silence fell like a guillotine. A dozen sets of eyes locked onto me. Mercenaries, bounty hunters, and the sort of people whose lives depended on knowing exactly who they shouldn't mess with. I ignored them. Even the most drunken idiot in this place knew better than to pick a fight with someone radiating white rank mana. I made my way to the bar counter, where a man was cleaning a glass with all the enthusiasm of a corpse doing taxes. He barely spared me a glance. "What'll you have?" "A bloody ghost," I said. That got his attention. He paused, finally looking at me properly. His eyes flickered downward for a split second, sensing my mana. White rank. He was the same. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the counter. "And how would you like it?" "On the rocks, like a red waterfall." A sharp glint flickered in his gaze. He tilted his head slightly. "On the rocks? That's unusual." I leaned in just slightly, lowering my voice. "What can I say? I like the sound of dripping blood." A slow, deliberate silence stretched between us. Then the bartender gave a slight nod and stepped back. I waited. A steel door at the far end of the bar slid open, its rusted hinges groaning like a dying beast. I walked through without hesitation. The passage led downward, far downward. With each step the world changed. The air grew thicker, saturated with the scent of oil, rust, and something acrid that clung to the lungs. The faint, rhythmic hum of machinery pulsed through the walls, a low vibration that never quite stopped. The true underbelly of Avalon. As I emerged into the underground district, the scenery shifted entirely. A sprawling marketplace, lit by flickering neon, stretched before me. Vendors peddled black market technology and drugs that weren't exactly legal by imperial standards. People moved in shadows, slipping between dimly lit alleyways where deals were made and betrayals sold for pocket change. Somewhere in this chaotic mess, my recruit was waiting. and it was time to find him. I moved through the market, masking my mana presence as I went. It was safer that way. Too much power invited too many questions, and questions had a way of leading to unwanted complications. Tonight, I wasn't here to make a scene. I was here for a recruitment. Somewhere in this chaotic sprawl of mercenaries, thieves, and illegal traders, there was a man I needed to find. A man everyone else had dismissed as worthless. The Grey Crows were a mercenary group. Not a guild, far from it. Guilds had influence, resources, and the backing of power. They were organizations, structured and well-oiled machines with long-term strategies. Mercenary groups? They were temporary alliances at best, often skirting the edges of the law, surviving job to job, hire to hire. Weapons for rent, bound to the highest bidder, but never for long. They had less power, less money, and significantly less future. But they had one thing guilds didn't always have: people who could disappear completely when necessary. That was the appeal. And that was why I was here. I found the Grey Crow sigil hanging over a narrow, metal-plated stall, one of dozens scattered throughout the underground marketplace. A figure in a deep hood sat behind the counter, exuding the kind of calm indifference that came from a lifetime of low expectations. "How may the Grey Crows be of service to you?" he asked, voice flat. "I'm looking for a mercenary," I said. His fingers tapped the counter. "Specific code name?" "Lazy Panda." The tapping stopped. I saw the smallest hesitation, a subtle flicker of confusion. It lasted less than a second, but I caught it. Lazy Panda. A known failure of a mercenary. Someone with no combat achievements, no reputation, no notable skills beyond surviving long enough to keep getting pitiful assignments. His reaction confirmed what I already knew. No one ever specifically asked for Lazy Panda. Which made my request very interesting. I slid a stack of cash across the counter. Not a bribe, just a shortcut. The hooded man considered it, then took the cash. "Wait here," he muttered, before disappearing into the depths of the marketplace. I waited. Minutes passed. Then footsteps. I looked up as a man approached. Chapter 214. He wasn't impressive. Mid-20s. Auburn hair. Dark eyes. He carried a low-grade spear, the kind of weapon practically handed out in bulk to academy dropouts and street fighters. His mana rank barely scraped mid-yellow rank, which meant he was far weaker than even the lowest-ranked first year at Mythos Academy. Objectively speaking, complete nobody. But I wasn't here for strength. "Codename Lazy Panda at your service," he greeted with a small bow, his tone somewhere between polite and utterly uninterested. I gestured for him to follow. "We're talking somewhere else." He didn't argue, didn't hesitate. Smart. I led him out of the underworld, stepping back into the pulsing lights and clean streets of Avalon. The contrast was almost jarring, from dim neon corridors and whispered deals to towering skyscrapers and perfectly regulated hover traffic. The same city, two different worlds. We entered the same bar I had used as an entry point. This time I took a seat. Lazy Panda sat across from me. "So," he said, leaning back lazily, fingers drumming on the table. "What exactly do you need me for?" I smiled. The question should have been why me? But he didn't ask that. Because he already knew the answer was interesting. And that meant he was already thinking. Good. Elias Vance, 27 years old. Currently, a low-ranking mercenary known for his lacking combat ability. However, he was once in the Slatemark Empire's intelligence division due to his sharp mind. Unfortunately, he was dropped since he failed to reach the desired mana rank. I smiled thinly, letting the silence stretch just a moment before I replied. "Let me introduce myself first. I am Arthur Nightingale, rank one of the first years of Mythos Academy." His eyes widened before he controlled them, not saying anything. "Elias, you're not here to be another anonymous cog in a machine. You see the chaos of Avalon, a mess of wasted potential and half-baked schemes. And you know that it's ripe for a mind like yours," I said. He raised an eyebrow.
"I'm listening."
I leaned in, lowering my voice as if about to reveal a grand cosmic secret. "You're a strategist, a mind that calculates the unpredictable. While others scramble in the dark, you see the chessboard. I'm building Ouroboros Guild. A guild that isn't content to merely survive, but to reshape the very game." Elias drummed his fingers again, skepticism flickering in his eyes. "And why would I want to play your game?" "Because," I said, tilting my head with a conspiratorial glint, "you deserve more than the scraps they throw at you in this rat race. Imagine having the power to call the shots, being the unseen hand that moves the pieces. With us, your intelligence won't just be an asset. It will be the backbone of an empire. He leaned forward, interest pricking through his lazy facade. Sounds like a lot of responsibility. And what's in it for me? I let out a soft chuckle. For starters, think of it as your ultimate chess match. One where you're the grandmaster. I'm offering you a seat at the table. A chance to steer the future, not just watch it unfold. I'm talking about influence, resources, and the freedom to execute your own ideas without the usual bureaucracy. Elias's gaze hardened, and I saw his mind shift gears. Influence, resources, freedom. You know those aren't exactly free, Arthur. What's your angle? Simple, I said, tapping the table lightly. You join Ouroboros, and your intellect will be rewarded not just with coin, but with real power. Power that'll let you shape outcomes, rewrite rules, and finally get the recognition you deserve. I'm not asking you to be a pawn. I'm inviting you to be the mastermind behind it all. A slow smile crept across Elias's face, half amused, half intrigued. So, you're saying you're building an empire, and you want me to be its brains? Exactly, I replied, meeting his gaze steadily. In a world where everyone is content with mediocrity, you're the anomaly, the one who can see what lies beneath. With you on board, Ouroboros won't just survive. It'll flourish, and you'll finally get to be the one who calls the shots. For a long moment, Elias was silent, his eyes appraising me as if weighing the cost of such a gamble. Finally, he nodded slowly. All right, Arthur, he said, his voice low and measured. I'll play your game. I grinned, knowing the match had begun. Excellent, I said, sliding a document across the counter. This is our guild's contract. Not binding in the old-fashioned sense, but it marks your entry into Ouroboros. Elias picked up the document, his eyes lingering on it. And if I decide to back out? He asked, his tone cautious yet amused. Then you'll have the satisfaction of knowing you helped build an empire. A guild that's set to redefine power in the world. But let's be honest. No one else will offer you the freedom and influence I'm offering. Other groups treat your talents like trinkets. With us, you'll be the mastermind behind every move we make. He tapped his fingers against the counter, his eyes narrowing into that calculating gaze I knew all too well. All right, I'm in. But I want full control over my strategic domain. No half measures. I grinned, a spark of triumph lighting my eyes. I wouldn't have it any other way. Welcome aboard, Elias. Our first order of business is to overhaul our recruitment strategy, and you'll have your hands in every major decision. We shook on it. A firm, silent agreement that echoed like a promise in the low hum of neon and machine chatter. In that moment, the underbelly of Avalon seemed to fade, replaced by the potent idea of change. To Ouroboros Guild, I toasted quietly, lifting a glass of deep red synthetic liquor. May our minds be as sharp as our blades and our plans as endless as the snake that devours its tail. Elias raised his glass, a glimmer of unspoken challenge in his eyes. To reshaping the world, he declared. And so it was. Two brilliant minds, bound by ambition and a shared desire for freedom, sealed their fates with a handshake and a promise. In that dim, subterranean world of clandestine deals and flickering holograms, our alliance was born. A spark of hope in a realm too often dimmed by mediocrity. The future of Ouroboros Guild had just taken its first, decisive step. Anyway, I said, leaning back and stretching my arms, you need to get a 3-star license. Once you have it, sign the contract, bring it to the guild, and we'll handle the paperwork. That's your official entry into Ouroboros. Elias tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. And my role? Guild secretary officially, I replied. Unofficially? The mind that keeps the entire machine running. His lips twitched in amusement. Flattering, but I'll reserve my judgment until I see what kind of machine you're actually building. You'll see soon enough, I assured him. But before that, I need your help with something else. Hiring 3 more people. Elias's brow lifted. Only 3. 3 very specific individuals, I corrected. Like you, they're unique. Talents that exist in their own category, still unclaimed by the major organizations that would kill to have them. They'll be the foundation of Ouroboros. He exhaled through his nose, thoughtful. And you won't tell me who they are? I gave him a lazy shrug. I'm not that trusting. Figures. He smirked, shaking his head. Guess I'll find out when I get there. Exactly, I said, rising to my feet. Sort out your business with Gray Crows, get that license, and then we'll talk. Elias extended his hand, and I shook it. A firm grip, the kind that sealed deals without another word. All right, he said. I'll see you at the guild. I turned and walked away, weaving back into the flow of Avalon's underbelly, the neon lights and scattered voices washing over me. One down. The other three. They weren't going to be as easy. Chapter 2:15. Elias Vance had been an easy acquisition, just as expected. He was waiting for someone to gamble on his intelligence, someone who saw him as more than just a disposable strategist in the underworld. He had no real loyalty to the Gray Crows or the scraps they tossed his way. He wanted something bigger, something where his mind wasn't just tolerated but valued. And I had given him that. The others, though? A different story entirely. One I could only approach once I returned to Mythos Academy. Another I needed to be at integration rank to even have a conversation with, which left me with just one option. The very next day, Elias turned up at Ouroboros Guild headquarters, handed over his signed contract, and officially joined the team. He didn't waste time settling in. He immediately started assessing our operations, analyzing everything with that sharp, calculating gaze of his. Meanwhile, Callie had done her part, managing to hire 3 from her assigned list. That put our total members at 6. Promising start. But now it was time for the next piece of the puzzle. You want to hire her? Elias asked, looking at me like I had lost my mind. I nodded. Reika Solien, he repeated, as if testing the name for flaws. She isn't strong. Not yet, I corrected. She's talented, sure, but nothing groundbreaking. High orange rank at 18? At best, she'll hit yellow rank soon, maybe silver rank in the future. She'll make a solid 4-star adventurer if lucky, but that's about it. I smiled, shaking my head. You're missing the full picture, Elias. There's more to her than what's on the surface. Reika Solien wasn't part of the main cast in the novel, but she had something others didn't. A path. A slow, painstaking, unstoppable path. Her potential wasn't on the level of Lucifer or Rachel, but she had something rare. An unbreakable trajectory toward greatness. If nurtured correctly, she would reach immortal rank one day, comparable to Callie, and she had no idea. Elias crossed his arms, clearly unimpressed. Even if you're right, there's still one problem. She graduated from Mavrin Academy's lower division. If she's going back for the upper division, we'd have to wait. She won't go back, I said simply. Elias narrowed his eyes. And you know that how? Call it foresight, I said, flashing him a smirk. His fingers drummed against his arm, irritation creeping into his expression. All right, fine. Keep your secrets. But if we're chasing a potential that doesn't pay off, that's on you. I chuckled. I wouldn't waste my time if I didn't know she was worth it. Elias sighed in defeat. And while you're off chasing hidden talents, I assume you want me to continue scouting the other 2? I nodded. Find them, observe them, but don't approach them yet. Timing matters. Elias gave a mock salute. Sure thing, boss. Let's hope your gamble pays off. I watched as he left, my thoughts already shifting toward my next move. I had a guild to build, and Reika Solien was about to become a part of it, whether she realized it or not. This world was locked in a ceaseless war. One fought not just on battlefields, but in shadows, in whispers, in the spaces between ordinary life and the abyss clawing at its edges. At the heart of that war stood the 5 cults and the monstrous species they served. Or rather, 4 cults. One had supposedly been destroyed long ago. Its name faded into obscurity, its followers scattered like ash in the wind. But that was not true. Each cult was a force unto itself, led by a radiant rank cult leader and backed by legions of miasmic creatures. Their strength rivaled entire continents, their ambitions woven into the fabric of history like a lingering infection. They struck without warning, carving through civilization like a rusted blade, and Reika Solien was born in the aftermath of one such strike. She wasn't supposed to exist, not in the way ordinary humans did. An artificial weapon, spliced together from stolen knowledge, forbidden science, and human fragility. She had been crafted for war. But something went wrong. She escaped before she could be molded into the perfect instrument of destruction. Her memories, however, didn't escape with her. Wiped clean, she became just another child in the Slatemark Empire. A girl of unremarkable talent, moving through life with a quiet determination but no true greatness. Except that wasn't the truth. Her mediocrity was a lie, one she unknowingly forced upon herself. The trauma of her past had buried her potential, locking away a power so vast that if she ever unearthed it, she could stand among legends. In the novel, she was a tragedy in motion, a misunderstood villain. Her story was never meant to be one of triumph. She existed to teach Lucifer Windward a lesson, that not all who fall into darkness do so by choice, that some are simply born into it, shaped by hands that were never their own. She had died proving a point. A waste of talent, of potential, of a life that could have been more. That wasn't going to happen this time. This time I would steal her first. Reika Solien didn't belong in the margins of someone else's story. She belonged in Ouroboros, where she wouldn't be a footnote or a tragedy, where she could be something greater. First, though, I had to find her. Right now, she was in a foster house, carrying the weight of expectation on her shoulders. The kind of pressure that forced people into dull, stable futures with no room for risk or ambition. She needed security, money, a way to provide. And I was about to give her an offer she couldn't refuse. Maverick Academy was no sanctuary for the elite, but it wasn't exactly a place you could stroll into without a solid financial backing either. It hovered in that awkward middle ground, too expensive for the poor, too mediocre for the rich, making it the perfect place for someone like Reika Solien. That made her predictable. It also made her vulnerable. I found her where I expected to, outside a small, overcrowded bookstore, tucked into a quiet corner of Avalon's lower districts. She stood under the neon glow of a flickering sign, flipping through the pages of an old manual on combat techniques. Not a flashy one, either. Something practical meant for survival, not glory. Reika Solien had the look of someone who had been built to endure. Her hair was a deep violet, cut just above her shoulders in a way that suggested either practicality or sheer indifference to fashion. Her eyes, the same striking shade, scanned the pages with a cold efficiency. Not the wide-eyed curiosity of a student, but the sharp analysis of someone who measured every piece of knowledge by its usefulness. Her frame was lean, not underfed, but close enough to make you wonder how often she skipped meals to stretch her funds further. She hadn't noticed me yet. I leaned against a nearby post, watching for a moment. Planning on learning that by osmosis? I finally asked. Her head snapped up, violet eyes locking onto me. There was no immediate reaction, no surprise, no hostility, just a measured assessment. She was the kind of person who had learned that showing emotion first was a mistake. Depends, she said, voice steady, unreadable. Does that work? I stepped closer, glancing at the book in her hands. Not unless you've got a gift for it. Which, given that you're still standing here reading instead of demonstrating your newfound mastery, I'm guessing you don't. She shut the book, unimpressed. I'll manage. Maybe, I conceded. But it'll take time. And time's not exactly something you have a lot of. Is it? Her fingers twitched against the book's spine. A tiny, almost imperceptible reaction, but one that told me everything. She wasn't just reading because she was interested. She was reading because she needed to be better. Fast. Who are you? She asked, eyes narrowing slightly. Arthur Nightingale, I said easily. You might have heard of me. Her brow furrowed, just for a second. She had, but she wasn't sure why I was here. You're with Mythos Academy, she said slowly. That's right. And I'm here to offer you a job. She didn't scoff. She didn't laugh. She didn't say no. Go on, she said instead, tilting her head.
I'm listening.
I pulled out the contract, placing it on the table between us. This is a contract to join Ouroboros, a rising guild in Slatemark Empire. You'd start with a competitive salary, full benefits, and the kind of long-term stability that would make Maverin's tuition fees look like pocket change. Reika didn't move, didn't so much as breathe. Then, she slowly, carefully set the book down and folded her arms. What's the catch? She asked. I smiled. She was exactly as sharp as I'd expected. Chapter 216, Rachel's Sweet 16. Recruiting Reka Solien had ended in failure. Not surprising. On paper, the offer was excellent, a competitive salary, stability, and a future in a growing guild that would one day shake the world. But to someone like Reka, who had spent her entire life dodging disappointments, it was just another too-good-to-be-true story. From her perspective, Ouroboros was barely even a guild yet. A newly minted bronze-rank guild, lacking reputation, lacking security, and hadn't even gotten permanent status yet. And I? Some mysterious, masked figure throwing contracts around like a desperate recruiter for an already very suspicious guild. So naturally, I was also very suspicious. She had no reason to trust me. No reason to believe that, of all people, I had chosen her for a reason she couldn't yet see. So I let it go. For now. I'd try again after Rachel's birthday. Rachel's birthday was on the 15th of July, a full-blown continental event in the north. The Creighton family spared no expense, turning what should have been a simple Sweet 16 celebration into a grand affair that echoed across the entire northern continent, and, inevitably, bled into the rest of the world. The second princess of the north was turning 16. And the world would know it. I was, of course, invited. Not because I was Arthur Nightingale. Even though I was rank 1, I didn't have noble standing. Because I was her close friend. I found myself genuinely looking forward to seeing Rachel again. She had that way about her, effortless warmth, boundless energy, the kind of presence that could lift a room just by being in it. It was impossible not to get swept up in her vibrance. And I wanted her to be happy on her birthday. I looked out the window as the plane descended over Luminark, the capital city of the land owned by the Creighton family. A place where the sky was always crisp and the air carried the scent of frost, even in summer. The moment I stepped off the plane, I heard her. Arthur. A familiar, bright voice called out over the terminal, and I turned to see her. Rachel Creighton, waving enthusiastically, holding a sign with my name on it.
Déjà vu.
For a second, I was back in the eastern continent, stepping off a plane as Serafina greeted me with that same eager energy. Rachel, however, was louder. Beside her stood a woman with silver hair and deep blue eyes, her expression far more reserved, calm, composed, watching. Kathleen Creighton, Rachel's older sister. 5 years her senior, an exceptional mage in her own right, but not quite the prodigy Rachel was. Unlike Rachel, she didn't radiate excitement. She measured the world before stepping into it. I took a step forward, smiling. "Ratch," I said. "You really made a sign?" "Of course," she grinned. "I had to make sure you felt welcome." As if I could ever feel unwelcome with her around. Rachel barely gave Kathleen time to finish her sentence before she tossed the sign into her sister's arms and lunged forward, arms open. I barely had a second to prepare before she collided into me, wrapping me in a tight hug. "I missed you," she said, her voice warm against my shoulder. "I missed you too," I replied, arms instinctively circling her back. We kept in touch, calls, messages, even a few late-night conversations. But it wasn't the same. Being here in front of each other felt different. Better. Rachel pulled back, still beaming, and turned to gesture at her sister. "Anyway, this is my sister, Kathleen." I straightened up. While I didn't need to bother with honorifics when addressing Rachel, Serafina, or Cecilia, the perks of being close friends, the same couldn't be said for Kathleen. She was a Creighton, the eldest daughter, princess. I placed a hand over my chest and bowed lightly. "It's an honor, Your Highness. My name is Arthur Nightingale." Kathleen tilted her head slightly, studying me. Then, she extended a hand, offering a small smile. "Just Kathleen," she corrected, shaking my hand. "No need for titles. I heard a lot about you from Rachel." "Thank you then, Kathleen," I said, appreciating the gesture. Rachel, meanwhile, had gone suspiciously quiet. A second later, I glanced at her and saw it. The telltale pink creeping up her cheeks. I raised an eyebrow. "Did you really talk a lot about me?" "Not much," Rachel mumbled, suddenly very interested in the way her fingers twirled a strand of golden hair. Kathleen let out a soft hum, her blue eyes gleaming with amusement. "Not much," she repeated. "I think the definition of not much has changed in recent years. Considering the amount of yapping I had to endure, I'd say it was quite a lot." I almost burst out laughing right then and there. Rachel Creighton, the radiant, confident, never embarrassed princess of the North. Absolutely flustered. She turned a deeper shade of red and lightly shoved her sister's arm. "Shut up, big sis. Let's go already." Before I could say another word, she grabbed my wrist and pulled me along. Kathleen followed at a leisurely pace, still looking far too entertained for my liking. The three of us stepped into the sleek, high-tech car waiting for us outside. No security, no guards. There was no need. Kathleen Creighton was standing on the verge of immortal rank, one of the strongest people in the world, and easily among the top 150. Anyone foolish enough to think they could threaten the princesses of the North wouldn't even get the chance to blink before regret set in. "But Ratch, you didn't have to come pick me up," I said, leaning back against the plush seat. "Shouldn't you be drowning in birthday preparations?" She turned to me, her sapphire eyes locking onto mine, and shrugged as if the answer was obvious. "I don't care. I care more about you." I stared. Rachel had always been bold, but somehow, hearing her say that so plainly, so effortlessly, it did something to me. I felt the heat rise to my cheeks, and I quickly looked away, focusing on the passing cityscape through the tinted window. The car glided smoothly over the streets, nearly silent save for the faint hum of the engine. Kathleen sat in the front, composed as ever, while Rachel and I were in the back. And that's when I noticed it. Her manner. Rachel had changed. She reached white rank, I realized, my eyes flickering back to her, scanning her more closely. It was subtle, but the difference was there, in the way her presence felt, in the way mana seemed to shift around her rather than just through her. This was faster than in the novel. Much faster. Rachel must have caught my stare, because she suddenly smirked. "Arthur?" she murmured, her voice carrying a hint of something teasing, something unspoken. "You're staring." I turned my head away, forcing myself to look at anything but her. She laughed, soft, delighted. Then, under her breath, just loud enough for me to hear, "I don't mind if you do, though, in private." My fingers twitched slightly against my knee. First Serafina, now Rachel. What is happening? I thought, suppressing a shudder. Then, another thought surfaced. Cecilia. A chill ran down my spine. I could only imagine what she was going to pull, and that thought was frankly terrifying. Rachel, seemingly oblivious to my inner crisis, shifted slightly, resting her chin against her palm as she watched me. "So, Arthur," she started casually, but her voice held an edge of curiosity. "You spent a lot of time in Mount Hua, right?" I nodded. Her expression softened, just slightly. "How was it? Being with Serafina?" I thought back to my time there. I had gained a lot, not just in strength but in something deeper. Mount Hua had given me the idea for my second movement, a technique that would only come to life once I reached integration rank. That alone made my time there invaluable. But more than that, more than any skill, any breakthrough, I had gained something else. Serafina. I looked at Rachel. She tilted her head slightly, waiting. I wondered, could I help her move past her own demons? Was it time yet? "It was good," I finally said, choosing my words carefully. "I learned a lot, and, of course, I spent time with Sarah." Rachel's lips parted slightly at that, her expression unreadable. Then, she smiled. But this time it didn't quite reach her eyes. Chapter 217. Our car rolled smoothly through the towering gates of the Creighton estate, a fortress of wealth and power that stretched across the horizon like something out of a fairy tale. Yet, even as the grand halls and ornate archways came into view, my mind was elsewhere. Spinning, racing, caught in a whirlwind I couldn't quite control. Because Arthur was here. I had missed him more than I thought possible, and now, sitting this close to him, everything else seemed distant. The weight of the day, the pressure of the expectations, the lingering shadows of memories I refused to name. It all felt lighter. Not gone, not forgotten, but somehow bearable. With Arthur beside me, the world felt easier to hold. I led him through the estate, my fingers itching to reach for his hand, but I held myself back. Instead, I showed him to his guest room, forcing myself to keep things normal, to keep my voice steady. "Freshen up and rest," I told him, offering a smile that felt too warm, too open. "Tomorrow's a big day." Arthur met my eyes with that unreadable look of his, like he always knew more than he let on. "Yeah, see you tomorrow, Ratch." I turned away, walking quickly before I let my heart make any decisions for me. As I rounded the corner, my sister's voice cut through my thoughts. "I never thought I'd see you like this, Rachel." I glanced up, only to find Kathleen leaning against the wall, watching me with a knowing smirk. "Like what?" I asked, though the heat rising to my cheeks told me exactly what she meant. "Like a helpless girl in love." She chuckled, shaking her head. Has that boy really captured that much of your heart? My mouth opened to argue, but the words stuck. I wanted to deny it, to push back, to tell her she was being ridiculous. But all that came out was a stammered, maybe. Kathleen laughed. That rare, soft laugh that only ever surfaced when she thought she had me cornered. Anyway, big sis, I'm going to my room. Don't follow me, I declared, whirling on my heel before she could say anything else. Her laughter followed me down the hallway. Inside my room, I stopped in front of the mirror, pressing a hand to my burning cheeks. My reflection stared back, my blue eyes wide, my lips curling into something almost shy. I finally understand what those girls were talking about, I thought, remembering Serafina and Cecilia's teasing. They had said there was a way to win Arthur over completely. A secret, a trick, but they had refused to tell me, claiming it wouldn't be fair. But now I knew. I glanced down, looking at the heavy weight that burdened my shoulders and back. I don't get why they like it this way, I muttered, turning slightly, evaluating the way it looked. It was annoying. It didn't help in a fight at all. If anything, it was inconvenient. But then, I thought about the way Arthur had looked at me earlier. The way his eyes had flickered. The way his gaze had lingered for just a second too long. And my lips curled into a slow, victorious smile. If Arthur likes it, I murmured, nodding at my reflection, then I guess it's fine. Because Arthur was mine. And nobody else was going to have him. The night stretched long and quiet, but I forced myself to go to bed early. I wanted to spend more time with Arthur, but I decided to wait, to surprise him, because tomorrow was my birthday. H. A girl chirped with delight, running across the garden with steps full of joy. Her golden tresses shimmered in the sunlight, and the mage guards watched her with fond smiles as she was followed by her attendants. The girl's blue eyes widened when she spotted a familiar figure sitting by the waterfall, dipping her feet into the cool water while working on a tablet. "Mama!" she called out loudly, running up to the woman. The woman turned, her features a mirror image of her daughter's. She handed the tablet to her attendant, opening her arms wide to catch her daughter, making sure they didn't both end up tumbling into the water. "There's my little angel," she said, tickling the girl and filling the air with her joyful laughter. "I apologize, Your Majesty," the girl's attendant said to the woman, as the little girl pouted in her mother's arms. "No worries, Elena. I'm sure you did your best," the mother replied, pressing a gentle kiss on her daughter's forehead. Mommy, the girl said, settling into her mother's lap. "Yes, my lovely angel?" the woman asked, smiling warmly. "What gift will I get for my birthday?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Oh, that's right. It's your birthday soon," the mother replied, playfully acting surprised. "You're turning 5 now, aren't you?" "Yes," the girl exclaimed with glee. The woman chuckled softly, brushing a golden lock away from her daughter's face. "So, what does my little angel want? A big hug? A special kiss?" The girl shook her head vigorously, her smile widening.
"No, Mommy."
"I want a real adventure, like the stories Daddy tells me." The woman blinked, surprised but amused. "An adventure, huh? My little one is already so brave," she said, her eyes twinkling. "Very well. We'll plan a special adventure, just for you. But you'll have to promise me one thing." The girl's eyes widened, eager. "What is it, Mommy?" "Promise me you'll be the bravest little explorer there ever was, and always stay close to Mommy and Daddy," she said, gently squeezing her daughter's small hands. "I promise," the girl declared confidently, her voice filled with enthusiasm. The mother laughed, hugging her daughter close. "All right then, an adventure it is. We'll make sure it's an adventure you'll never forget." The girl clapped her hands, her laughter echoing through the garden. She then turned to the side, her eyes lighting up as she recognized the approaching figure. "Daddy! Daddy!" she called out joyfully, raising her little arms in excitement. "Hello, my 2 beautiful ladies," the silver-haired man said, a warm smile spreading across his face as he drew closer. He leaned down, kissing his wife and daughter on their foreheads. The little girl giggled, reaching for him. "Daddy," Mommy said, "we're going on an adventure for my birthday." The man raised an eyebrow, his smile growing. "An adventure, you say? Well, that sounds like a splendid idea," he said, lifting his daughter into his arms. "What kind of adventure would my brave little one like?" The girl paused, scrunching up her face in thought. "I want to find treasure, like in the stories you tell me, Daddy," she said with enthusiasm. The man chuckled, sharing a knowing glance with his wife. "Treasure, I think we can arrange something special for our brave explorer. What do you think, my love?" he asked, turning to his wife. She smiled softly, nodding. "I think it's perfect. We'll make sure our little adventurer finds the greatest treasure there is." The little girl squealed in delight, wrapping her arms around her father's neck. "The greatest treasure! I can't wait." The man held her close, his gaze warm as he looked at his wife. "Then it's settled. We'll prepare the most wonderful adventure. One that our little Rachel will remember forever." Crash. Bang. The sound of something shattering echoed from the room, making Rachel flinch as she stood just outside the door. Her small hands curled into fists, her golden curls bouncing as she looked down, her blue eyes filled with confusion and sadness. She didn't understand. She missed her mommy so much, but no one would let her see her. Her father and Elena had both said she shouldn't, that she needed to wait, that it wasn't the right time yet. But she missed Mommy. The promise of an adventure still echoed in her memory. Mommy had said they would go on a real adventure, and Daddy had promised to take her too. They were going to find treasure together, just like the stories. It was going to be wonderful, an adventure she would remember forever. But when? When would they go? When would she see Mommy again? Tears threatened to spill down her cheeks as she hugged herself, feeling a deep emptiness that only her mother could fill. She wanted to ask someone, anyone, why she couldn't go in, why everything had changed. "Mommy," she whispered to herself, her voice trembling. She didn't understand why everyone was keeping her away. Suddenly, the door creaked open slightly. Rachel's eyes widened, her heart skipping a beat as she cautiously stepped closer. She could barely breathe, her tiny hands trembling as she reached for the door. With a gentle push, she widened the opening just enough to peek inside. And there, through the small slit, she saw her. Mommy. Her mommy was there. Chapter 2:18. Rachel's eyes filled with tears, her lips parting in a small gasp. Her mother looked just as beautiful as she remembered, golden hair glowing, her gentle features as kind as ever. Then her mother turned to face her, her eyes softening, and a warm smile spread across her face. The same smile that always made everything feel better. "Mommy," Rachel whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. The little girl didn't think twice. She pushed the door open wider, slipping inside the room as quietly as she could. She hurried towards her mother, her tiny footsteps barely making a sound on the polished floor. "Rachel," her mother whispered, her voice like a gentle melody, almost as if she was surprised. She knelt down, her arms opening wide, and Rachel ran right into them, wrapping her small arms around her mother's neck. "Mommy, I missed you so much." Rachel's voice broke, tears now streaming down her cheeks as she buried her face in her mother's shoulder. Her mother hugged her tightly, her warmth enveloping Rachel, and for a moment, everything felt right again. The world outside faded away, leaving only the two of them. "My sweet angel," her mother said softly, stroking Rachel's hair. "I missed you too. So very much." Rachel sniffled, holding on tighter. "When are we going on our adventure, Mommy? You promised." Her mother hesitated, and Rachel saw her eyes flicker strangely. No, they were glowing. There was something in her mother's eyes, something that made Rachel feel lost, as if she was being pulled into an abyss. Suddenly, her mother threw her head back and laughed. A laugh that didn't sound like the one Rachel knew. It was wild, uncontrolled, almost a scream. The sudden shift terrified her. Her mother's grip on her loosened, and she let go of Rachel, her hands clawing at her own hair as she shrieked. The room filled with her cries, echoing off the walls. "And Mommy, Rachel stammered, her small voice barely audible against the sound of her mother's screams. She reached out, but her mother seemed lost in her own world. Live! 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 Her mother muttered under her breath, her voice cracking. The glow in her eyes flickered, fading, until her gaze finally fell back onto Rachel. With a sudden movement, her mother grabbed her again, her hands wrapping tightly around Rachel's small arms, almost painfully so. "You will listen to what Mommy says, won't you, Rachel?" her mother said, her lips curling into a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Rachel winced at the pain, but she nodded quickly. "Why yes, Mommy," she replied, her voice trembling. After all, her mommy would never hurt her. Her mother's smile widened, and she leaned forward, pressing a kiss on Rachel's forehead. "Good girl," she whispered. Rachel smiled, feeling a flicker of warmth, believing her mother was showing her love. But she never saw the harsh slap coming. The force of it made her head snap to the side, a stinging pain spreading across her cheek. Shock filled her blue eyes as tears welled up, her small body recoiling. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice breaking, as she looked up at her mother, unable to understand what had just happened. Her mother's face was twisted, a mixture of sorrow and anger, her eyes flickering with that eerie glow once again. And just as quickly, the twisted expression vanished, replaced by a hollow, empty stare. Rachel's heart pounded, her confusion and fear tangling into an aching knot. She couldn't understand. This wasn't her mommy. Not the one who promised adventures, who held her with warmth and love. "Mommy?" she whispered again, hoping for the warmth to return, for her mommy to come back to her. For the next week, Rachel was left alone with her mother. It should have been the happiest time of her life, finally spending time with her mother after so many weeks of being apart. But instead, it was nothing short of a nightmare. A week of hell. Her mother's moods shifted like the wind. One moment, she was gentle, whispering words of love, brushing Rachel's golden hair with delicate fingers. But the very next moment, her eyes would flicker with that eerie glow, and her hand would lash out. A slap that made Rachel's ears ring, or worse, a jolt of magic that left her trembling in pain. Rachel cried herself to sleep most nights, curling into a small ball under her blanket, her body sore from the constant beatings. Her mother was unpredictable, and Rachel learned to fear every creak of the floorboards, every shadow that passed by her door. She tried to understand, tried to tell herself that her mother was just sick, that it wasn't really her doing these things. But understanding didn't stop the fear. It didn't stop the hurt. "Save me," Rachel thought, tears silently trailing down her cheeks as she braced herself for another blow. But nobody came. No one knew. It was as if the world had forgotten her, and the only person left was this twisted version of her mother. The garden where they had once played together was now nothing more than a view through the window, a world that seemed unreachable. Rachel watched the flowers sway in the breeze, her small hands pressed against the glass. She longed to be out there, running through the grass, feeling the sunlight on her skin, away from the suffocating presence that filled the room behind her. "Rachel," her mother's voice called, a sweetness masking the darkness beneath. Rachel flinched, her small body tensing. "Come here, my darling," her mother said, her tone saccharine but her eyes still holding that flicker of madness. Rachel turned, her heart pounding as she slowly stepped away from the window. She approached her mother, her feet dragging, her head lowered. "Yes, Mommy?" she whispered, her voice barely audible, her gaze fixed on the floor. Her mother's fingers curled under her chin, lifting her face. "You know Mommy loves you, right?" she said, smiling in that twisted way that made Rachel's stomach churn. "Yes, Mommy," Rachel replied, her voice hollow, her eyes welling up with tears she dared not shed. "Good girl," her mother said, her fingers tightening painfully under Rachel's chin before letting go. Rachel stumbled back, holding in her tears, her small body trembling as she fought to keep herself from breaking. She could only hope, only wish, that somehow, someone would come and save her. After a full week of suffering, Rachel found herself once again at the mercy of her mother. This time, Her skin was being frozen, an agonizing chill creeping across her body as frost slowly spread over her delicate skin. Rachel shivered violently, her skin cracking under the freezing touch, her lips turning blue. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, her throat dry and raw from pleading with her mother to stop. But her words fell on deaf ears. Her mother's eyes held no warmth, just that eerie, unnatural flicker that had haunted Rachel for days. She had given up by now. No more cries, no more struggling, only silent tears that rolled down her cheeks. Suddenly, the door burst open with a force that made it slam against the wall. Rachel's eyes widened in surprise, and her head turned slightly, her vision blurry from tears. Her father stood in the doorway, his silver hair slightly disheveled, his expression twisted in fury. His steps were heavy, filled with barely restrained rage, and his eyes locked on her mother, who stood there unmoving, her cold fingers still outstretched toward Rachel. The atmosphere in the room changed in an instant. The frost that had been spreading over Rachel disappeared, melting away as a rush of warmth enveloped her. Her father's manna, a shield of warmth and protection, wrapped around her small form, pushing back the icy manna that had trapped her. He moved quickly, reaching Rachel and lifting her into his arms, cradling her tightly against his chest. "It's all right, Rachel. I'm here now," he whispered, his voice trembling with barely controlled anger as he turned away from his wife. He placed Rachel into Elena's waiting arms, his eyes never leaving his wife's hollow gaze. Elena clutched Rachel to her chest, her eyes wide with fear and concern. "Take her away, Elena. Now," he ordered, his voice hard as steel. Elena nodded quickly, turning to leave the room with Rachel. The little girl's head rested on Elena's shoulder, her tear-filled eyes looking back towards her parents. "Why are you doing this?" Alastair demanded, his voice trembling with both fury and pain. "What has happened to you?" Her mother stood still, her eyes flickering, her expression blank. She said nothing. "You're not the woman I married," he continued, his voice breaking slightly. "And you are no longer fit to be near Rachel." With a wave of his hand, a surge of manna filled the room. A complex pattern began to form, glowing circles that spun around her mother, growing in intensity until they wrapped around her completely. "9-circle spell, eternal prison," he intoned, his voice echoing with power. The glowing circles sealed into place, a barrier rising around her mother, encasing her in an impenetrable prison. The light of the spell flickered before solidifying, leaving her mother standing behind a transparent wall, her cold, empty eyes staring back. Rachel watched as the door closed behind them, her father's voice still echoing in her ears. Her heart ached, the confusion and fear almost too much for her small mind to comprehend. She buried her face in Elena's shoulder, tears flowing silently. Everything she had once known had changed, and now, all she could do was cling to whatever warmth remained. Chapter 219. Rachel's past was a wound she covered with smiles. A gaping, festering thing hidden beneath layers of bright laughter and boundless energy. Unlike Serafina, whose trauma had been shaped by loss, Rachel's had been carved into her by the very person meant to protect her, her mother, Isolde Creighton. Isolde, a seer, had been gifted with foresight, a gift that should have been a blessing, but instead, it had driven her to madness. She had seen something so terrifying that it had broken her. The novel's readers had long speculated about it, theorizing that she had glimpsed the world's end, a future of unchecked destruction, of demons returning and miasmic species running rampant, wiping humanity from existence. Whatever she saw, it consumed her. And Rachel, her own daughter, had been caught in the crossfire. The bright-eyed child who had once adored her mother had learned fear instead. That was why Rachel, despite being warm, despite being friendly, never let people truly in. She stood at the heart of a crowd, but there was always a line, an invisible wall she never let anyone cross. Because if the person who was supposed to love her the most had hurt her, then what stopped anyone else from doing the same? Her father, Alastair Creighton, had eventually subdued Isolde, trapping her beneath an unending spell to keep her contained. But the scars had already been etched deep into Rachel's soul, and that was what she had to overcome. She had to step beyond the fear, beyond the walls she had built around herself. Because if she didn't, she would never reach her true potential. Her gift, Saintess, was ridiculous. It made her light magic sharper, stronger, faster. It was the reason she was already at white rank, the reason she was accelerating past her own limits. But it wasn't enough. Her light wasn't as pure as it could be. And I knew exactly why. In ancient times, light magic had been called divinity, dark magic abyssal. Those names had been abandoned centuries ago, discarded after too many wars, too much bloodshed. But light and dark mana were still unique, twisted in ways that regular mana wasn't. When I reached integration rank, my white star would evolve, creating pure light, a light beyond conventional mana. My black star would do the same, turning into deep dark, a darkness that wasn't corrupt or evil, but something else entirely. Rachel's light should have been just as pure. It should have been blinding, but something held her back. She wasn't choosing to shine. Not fully. She was letting her gift carry her forward, letting her instincts guide her. But she was still hesitating. In the novel, she scraped by when she reached integration rank. Her gift compensated for the imperfection in her light, allowing her to keep pace with the other geniuses. But that flaw would remain. I couldn't let that happen. Not when I could fix it. Serafina had confronted her past and stepped beyond it. Now it was Rachel's turn. And I was going to make sure she did. Sleep had never come easily to me. My mind never shut up, constantly spinning, chasing thoughts that tangled and knotted themselves into problems I didn't have answers for. And tonight, it was worse. Because tomorrow wasn't just another day. It was Rachel's birthday. And if I wanted to help her face what was coming, the memories, the weight of it all, I couldn't afford to make a mistake. Serafina's trauma had been painful, but straightforward. I could guide her through it, force her to confront it. But Rachel was different. She had built walls not around her pain, but around herself. Serafina's sorrow was buried. Rachel's was locked behind doors she refused to open. A misstep could send her running. Or worse, shutting me out completely. Lucifer had made that mistake in the novel. He had tried to force his way in, thinking brute honesty and sheer force of will could fix her. It hadn't. It had only driven her further away. I wasn't going to be him. I sighed and turned over, staring at the ceiling. Thinking wasn't helping. I needed to calm down. Then came the knock. Soft, hesitant. I sat up immediately, frowning. Who would? Before I could even process the thought, the door slid open, and a blur of gold hit my chest. Rachel. She clung to me, arms tight around my waist, fingers gripping my shirt like I might disappear. What's wrong, Rach? I asked, my voice softer than I expected. She didn't answer, just held on tighter. I sighed, wrapping my arms around her and guiding us both inside, shutting the door behind us. Only then did I notice her ears were damp. She had been crying. The realization twisted something in my chest. Rachel was always so bright, so alive. Seeing her like this, trembling against me, so small, it made my heart ache. I reached up and wiped away the lingering tears on her cheek. Rachel, I murmured. What happened? She shook her head, pressing her forehead against my shoulder. I didn't mean to come, she mumbled, her voice thick. I had a bad dream. I knew what it was. Her mother. It always came back to her mother. She didn't need to say it. I just held her, letting her cry, letting her be. We sat like that on the edge of my bed, her body curled into mine, until the worst of it passed. Her breathing slowed, the tension in her shoulders easing just a little. Finally, she pulled back, rubbing at her red-rimmed eyes with an embarrassed little sniff. Sorry, she muttered. I just needed to see you. Don't be sorry, I said, catching her hand before she could turn away. I don't know what you're going through, Rach, but I want to be here, even if all I can do is sit with you. Her eyes met mine, wide and glistening. Then she pushed me. I yelped as I tumbled backward, landing flat against the mattress. Before I could react, she was on top of me, pinning me down, her golden hair cascading over us like a curtain. You're unfair, she whispered. I swallowed. What? She pouted, her cheeks still damp but her lips twitching at the corners. You're unfair, she repeated, leaning down, her nose almost touching mine. Making my life so hard while I'm trying not to like you. My heart stuttered. Then it started pounding. Rachel's hands curled into the fabric of my shirt, her body trembling with frustration, with something deeper, something raw. You know, Arthur, she said, her voice steady despite the blush darkening her cheeks. I may be the future saintess, but I'm a girl too. She exhaled sharply, her sapphire eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that sent a jolt through my chest. I like you. I told you I like you. And you said you like me too. Her fingers tightened, almost like she was grounding herself. You want me to wait. Fine. I accept it. But, her voice wavered. But, she shuddered, her breath hitching. And then suddenly, she snapped. Then don't be like this, she blurted, eyes burning, frustration spilling out like a dam breaking. Don't be so goddamn charming. So nice, so handsome and hot. I can't stop looking at you, you idiot. If you're going to be so effortlessly, stupidly attractive, then just do me. I blinked. Hard. Words failed me, and for the first time in a long time my brain just stopped working. Rachel, however, was far from finished. Are you just leading me on? She asked, turning her face away, her voice suddenly quieter, more fragile. Do you not care about me like I do for you? Is this all just funny to you? That you have 4 girls who most guys would die for, all of them in love with you? That it's all just handed to you? Her breath hitched, and she shook her head. I don't know what to do, Arthur. Ratch? I tried, but she cut me off with a finger pressed firmly to my lips. No, she whispered, her eyes locked onto mine, fierce and vulnerable all at once. Shut up. I stared at her, stunned. It's already past midnight, she said, exhaling shakily. Which means it's my birthday. A small, shaky smile tugged at her lips, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. And as the birthday girl, I get to do as I want. She leaned closer. So shut up, and let me talk. I closed my mouth, because really, what else could I do? Rachel took a breath, steadying herself. The first person I thought of coming to, after waking up from that stupid nightmare again, wasn't my father or my sister. It was you. Her grip on my shirt tightened. You, even though you don't know anything. You, even though I met you last, and those two are my family. She swallowed hard, searching my face, eyes glossy and desperate. Tell me, genius. Her voice cracked, just slightly. What do I do when my heart won't stop racing every time I see you? When I turn into one of those helpless, lovesick idiots because of you? How am I supposed to control myself, just because you have some mystery you need to figure out first? Her hands trembled. It's not fair. I opened my mouth, not even sure what I was going to say, but she wasn't finished. And you spent 3 weeks with Serafina. Her breath came faster, her frustration threatening to spill over again. All of them. She shook her head, her fingers twisting in my shirt. It's not fair. Her voice was shaking now, her composure crumbling. I could see it, the way she was barely holding herself together, the way her walls were cracking under the sheer weight of everything she was feeling. I wanted to reach for her. I wanted to say something. But the moment I opened my mouth, "Gah, do you not know when to shut up?" She groaned, glaring at me like I was the dumbest man alive. Then, suddenly, her expression shifted. Her lips parted slightly. Her gaze darkened. She tilted her head, considering something. And then, very softly, almost like she was testing the words, she whispered, I should teach you how to shut up. Before I could even process what was happening, she leaned down. A weight pressed against my chest. Our noses brushed. Her breath ghosted against my lips. This is my first time, she whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. So don't judge. Then, before I could think, before I could breathe, her lips met mine. Chapter 220. Her lips tingled, a lingering warmth pressing against them, as if the kiss had left something more than just a memory. Rachel exhaled, her breath shaky, her heart a wild drum against her ribs. Soft. His lips were so soft, delicate, yet irresistible. She didn't want to pull away, even though her lungs screamed for air, even though her body trembled slightly from the adrenaline of what she'd just done. She wanted to stay right there, but she had to breathe. So, reluctantly, she pulled back, gasping quietly as she licked her lips. Delicious. Her gaze fell upon Arthur beneath her, his azure eyes slightly dazed, his face tinged with an undeniable shade of red. Gods, she thought, her own cheeks growing hotter. How is he so unfairly handsome? The way his tousled hair fell against the sheets, the way his chest rose and fell in measured breaths, the way his lips, those lips, were still parted slightly from their shared moment. She swallowed hard. Rachel! Arthur's voice finally broke the silence, deep and steady, yet holding a touch of confusion. His voice, His voice. Did everything about him have to be so attractive? A slow, mischievous smile curled her lips. I'll take your lips as my birthday present. Okay? She murmured, her face burning brighter than ever. Arthur blinked up at her, still somewhat caught off guard. Rachel, however, wasn't done yet. She missed him. She missed him so much that the ache of longing felt almost physical. She'd held back for so long, keeping that distance, pretending she could stay content with just being near him. But now she wanted him. She needed him. More than anything, she had to make him hers. Then her eyes flickered downward, catching something interesting. Her lips twitched. Oh, she muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. Arthur went still. His entire body tensed, his hands clenched into fists against the sheets. Rachel grinned, leaning in slightly, her voice dropping into something teasing, though it trembled slightly with her own nervous excitement. Do you like the view? Arthur's reaction was immediate. His hand shot up, covering his eyes as he groaned. Rachel, why the hell did you become so much like Cecilia? Rachel froze. Did he not like it? For a moment, doubt crept into her mind, cold and unwelcome. Had she misread everything? Had she pushed too far? But then, don't look away, she huffed, grabbing his wrist before he could fully turn away. I'm the birthday girl. You have to look at me properly. Rachel, you need to. But she was already pulling his arm away, and when his eyes finally landed exactly where she wanted them to, he froze. Rachel bit her lip, watching his reaction closely, waiting for any flicker of disapproval. But instead, she saw it. The way his pupils dilated, the way his throat bobbed as he swallowed, the way his face turned an even deeper shade of red. A shiver ran down her spine. This is, she whispered, her voice a little unsteady, my best part. Her fingers fidgeted slightly, her usual confidence wavering for just a moment. Do you like it? Arthur averted his gaze. His face was practically glowing red now. Rachel inhaled sharply, eyes widening. He liked it. He liked it. A slow, giddy warmth spread through her chest. You like it? She murmured, her lips curling into a soft, very pleased smile. Then, she felt something press against her. She blinked, tilted her head. Then realization. Arthur's entire body stiffened beneath her. Her lips parted in surprise before she let out a delighted giggle, pressing a hand to her